Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this final session. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We have had 2 days of amazing presentations and panel discussions, and we've just come straight from 3 really interesting workshops. We hope you found the content really interesting. We hope that you found the format accessible, and we hope that you continue to engage afterwards. We're going to now have just a short 25-minute session chatting about training R skills for evidence synthesists of the future. So I wanted to open this up to a discussion. I'm really happy to welcome here, we've got Marc, Lajeunesse, Harriet, Downey, and Wolfgang, Viechtbauer, who are going to chat to us about their perspectives on the importance and nuances of training in R, in the nexus between R and evidence synthesis and meta-analysis. So I wanted to start off, if I could, with Wolfgang, actually, just to put you on the spot, Wolfgang, and say that many people who are tuning in right now have seen and taken part in your R training. Many of them, if not most of us, have used your metaphor packages and the examples that you've built in supporting the books that are already available with examples and those kind of things. Training is obviously really important to you, and I just wanted to hear how you feel about training in evidence synthesis and meta-analysis.
That's a very broad question. Well, so I've been teaching workshops of various kinds for a long time. And then, yeah, I started teaching our workshops, and by doing these on the live through Twitch, actually, I sort of wanted to give back a little bit to the community, because I think that's one of the great strengths of R, that you have this great community around it. But that only works when people really contribute to it, right? So people do that through R packages, but also by putting all kinds of great teaching materials out there. And that's where you have to start, right? First teaching people R before you can get to the point of, well, teaching them about certain R packages. Although I've heard people say, well, because of this or that package, that's why I started to use R. Actually, that's often a reason why people get really motivated to learn R for some specific functionality. So I come across this issue all the time, that people want to do a meta-analysis, and then while they are often used to working with SPSS, no shame in that, right? But we are not here to you know, brag on SPSS. It does its purposes, but it doesn't really provide good functionality for doing a meta-analysis, right? So now there are some macros by Marc, right? I think he has written some macros for SPSS, but well, they only cover some of the basics, right? So eventually you really have to start looking at alternatives. And then, well, if you want something at least that's free, then you essentially end up often choosing R. And so you have to teach people R itself and how to use a specific package. And that's quite a lot to take in at the beginning if that's the first time you're getting exposed to R. So that's a challenge. But also I've been trying to teach people R itself, and then, well, maybe through that, then they can also start exploring certain R packages that they find very useful. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm just kind of rambling here, but.
No, that was really good. Thank you so much. And Marc, we heard earlier in the open synthesis session about your package MetaGear, which was built, sorry about the banging in the background, which was built from an educational perspective. I wondered if you could speak about your experiences and your takeaways from that briefly.
Oh, it's been mostly a disaster, to be honest, just because the entry point is so tough. And like the majority of people I train, you know, we start at the undergraduate level, right? We want them to get their hands dirty with research right away so that they can help us with our projects. And so in my third year, fourth year bachelor's courses, I have them using R as quickly as I can. And it does suck up time from any course that I teach. You know, I teach parasitology, medical entomology. I front end that stuff with our tools so that we could actually do projects together. And a lot of students walk away from the course saying, this is the most awful experience ever. and with reason, because I feel like, you know, at least here in Florida, they just get no technical exposure whatsoever until they come to my course. And, you know, you're doing a science degree, you should have some understanding of tools at some point. But we focused on the wet tools a lot and not so much on the digital programming tools. And so Metagear, you know, was meant to facilitate a lot of that stuff. But again, if you don't understand why it's applicable to learn these things, you have no concrete experience to put things into perspective, then it's really tough to understand why you need to learn these details to begin with. And but as a research level, you know, we already know that these tools are super important for us to make things happen in a synthesis way. And so I think, you know, if you come in with that perspective, you really get engaged and you want to learn this stuff. I'm rambling also, but.
No, that's great. Thanks so much. I wondered if I could hand over to Harriet now to say, so I know Harriet through a collaborative manuscript, a paper and a project behind it to collate free resources in various aspects of evidence in conservation. I think it's the largest group of authors I've had on a paper. I was really, really touched and really happy to be involved in that project. And I contributed some of the resources I put together for free training in evidence synthesis. Harriet, I wondered what your perspectives are on any intricacies around training people in the frameworks of evidence production, evidence use, and evidence synthesis.
So the project itself has been an amazing experience. Like Neil just said, we've ended up with around 125 collaborators from 23 countries working in 12 different languages, trying to provide open education materials for conservation practitioners and decision makers and students about how do you find evidence, how do you put it into a meta-analysis or some sort of evidence synthesis, and then how do you apply that information at the end. And it's really surprising to me that a lot of university courses didn't offer any of this training, no training in evidence-based practice, no training in evidence synthesis. And then a lot of practitioners who were already out in the field writing guidance or making decisions about what we're going to do also have no training in this. And so often are making decisions based upon one or two studies they're familiar with, or some knowledge from colleagues and things like that. And so, we wanted to provide these materials to sort of aid in easing people into that training. And so, we've got a lot of materials, and it's all going online on Tuesday, actually. If anyone's interested, it will be on Applied Ecology Resources, which is a new database. So I'm excited to see it all coming out finally. But I think the one thing that a couple of people have touched on that we found quite difficult is, especially people who are already working and have finished their degrees, they don't necessarily have that much scientific training themselves, or if they do, they definitely don't have training in R. And so trying to teach them about using R to do evidence synthesis, usually for something like writing guidance or anything like that, has been really difficult because they kind of don't have the time to learn it. And they also don't have the sort of technical expertise to learn it either. I did just see today that someone has released a textbook for conservation practitioners to use R, and I was like, oh, amazing, that's exactly what we need. So maybe there's something coming from that, but it's great because it's free and it's collaborative, and like you said, I think it's one of the friendlier programs I've come across, but it's really the time and getting people to understand the technical aspects of it that we've really struggled with. So we're thinking of ways that we can get practitioners within our network to kind of share ways they've made it easier for themselves, and we'll see where it goes from there.
If I may jump in here, I think this point about time is super crucial. So I experienced this myself, that dare I say this here, I've been trying to learn Julia. So I don't know if you've heard about Julia. So this is probably not the place where I should mention this, but anyway, but it's very hard to find the time to learn new tools, new techniques, new software So there's a lot of inertia in general, and just things are changing, right? We see this change to open sciences practices. But before these things are complete standards, it will just take a lot of time, because the people who are now already out there doing research in a certain way, for them it's a very big investment to change their ways, right? So we have to start training the younger generation to sort of engage in these practices from the get-go. And then maybe over the course of the next 20, 30 years, that's sort of the time scale I think we have to be thinking about. We'll see gradual changes, but it's not going to happen just immediately that everybody is going to be using R. I think as much as we feel like, oh, we are this huge community, we are probably still the minority, right? So it's easy to get fooled into, I think, like, oh, everybody's using R. Well, that's only because I'm connected to the people who are already using R. But the vast majority of people out there, while they have heard of it, they think maybe I should learn it, but they are still not using R, for example. So I think we are still the minority when it comes to this.
I think that's a really good point. And one thing that I think very strongly is that the transferable skills that I often sell training, or not sell, but I sell the idea of training metaphorically, by emphasizing that the skills that you learn when you're doing evidence synthesis and meta-analysis are transferable. Things like searching, like critical appraisal, the open science aspect, because you start with a protocol or a preprint, they're really useful to then take away and use in other skills. And I actually increasingly think it's the other way around. Actually, we should be teaching these transferable skills like meta-analysis, like open science, like preprints, from an early stage, exactly as you said, and then you have a longer term lead in. You're waiting for the next generation who've had these skills to then recombine them. And it sort of touches on the concept that Alex Bannock-Brown was talking about earlier on today, the evidence ecosystems, where people have capacity for evidence synthesis. Yeah, so I was jumping in there. Marc, yeah.
Yeah, just to echo what you just said, I feel like, with my attempts to training undergraduates, a lot of these tools, even though they may not be interested in the long term in research, just knowing how to properly search and find information really elevates what they could achieve when they're writing term papers and essays and other things like that. I mean, what I've seen downstream is students, rather than just writing a straight up narrative review, they attempt to do a systematic review and collate information. And I always feel like that's an amazing thing to do that has a very crossover appeal in your life if you're interested in just like gathering information. And so to me, that's the one benefit, whether or not it actually spills over to better research practices, who knows? The attrition rate of people becoming scientists is very, very harsh, at least here it is. And but putting tools on people's radars and people understanding that there are kind of cool practices to make things more robust and repeatable and systematic, I think is just like a cool way, a cool philosophy to view things. Thanks very much, Marc. That's a really good point. We've had a comment on the Slack that by Jana Stoyanova, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, saying that it would be a great idea to collate
people's training efforts in evidence synthesis and meta-analysis in one place. I know there's lots around. Some of us here have produced some, and it would be great to have those in one place, much in the same way that you've done, Harriet, with the conservation evidence work. Do you have any comments on that? What should it look like? Where should it be? Are the community for this, or does it need to be sort of a different platform? Wolfgang or Harriet?
Oh, I was just going to say that was one of the issues we found when we were first trying to collate the materials together, is where are we going to store all of this stuff and who's going to host it for us? And that was kind of the issue. We just decided to do it because so many people had come to us asking for this material, and we were just emailing it out to people. And we were lucky that this resource happened to come along with perfect timing that wanted to host exactly these kind of resources. But that was another thing we found a lot in the work, is we don't know how to share it properly, or often when people come asking for materials, you know, I know of probably 50% of the stuff out there, if that. But yeah, I think where to host all of this material is a tricky question as well. Who's going to take responsibility for keeping it updated and things like that?
Yeah, I'd maybe share my experience of spending weeks designing an online training course in evidence synthesis. And hosting it on Eliademy, which was a free, really nicely designed training website that I found out 6 months later went bust and everything was deleted immediately. Thankfully, I had copies of lots of the stuff, but there was a lot of interactive stuff that I couldn't save anywhere, so I had to start from scratch. But that was a painful experience, thinking about where to host this stuff so that it's available for a long time. Harriet, can you say again where the resource that you're referring to is going to be available on Tuesday?
Yeah, it's called Applied Ecology Resources. It's a new platform from the British Ecological Society. So they'll be having a big database that hosts all kind of grey literature for conservation, which will be launching at a later date, but they're going to put out the education resources on Tuesday. So if there's somewhere I can share a link after, I'll be happy to do that.
Perfect. And the preprint of the paper, or the in press version, is available already, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it will be published alongside the materials on Tuesday.
Oh, great. Perfect. And then I had one more question I sort of touched on a little bit before. Does anybody think there is a tension, and whether it's worth discussing, between the ideal ways to do a literature review and the ideal ways to use an R package, which you might design a package to be very adaptable and work in several different ways, but the framework behind robust evidence synthesis might ideally not want people to take too many shortcuts. Is there a responsibility of people who design R packages to make sure that they point towards best standards, or is that too much? To what extent has this worried you? Maybe Wolfgang and Marc, start with you.
Yeah, I think you influence practices by how you write your R package. And along the way, you can make mistakes. So for example, like in metaphor, just to give an example, the default way of testing on constructing confidence intervals uses these Z-based, normal distribution-based, walled type confidence intervals and tests. And that's not a good choice, but that's the default. I should have made the Knappen-Hartung method, if anybody is familiar with this, which uses sort of an adjusted way of constructing these tests and confidence interval, which has been shown repeatedly to just be a better method. I should have made that the default, but I didn't. And now it would be, I don't want to change the default, because, well, then you're breaking backwards compatibility, which I think is something that you also have to really sort of be aware of and try not to do that. So yeah, you can make sort of mistakes or things you regret afterwards. You wish you had done them differently. And because you do influence by setting certain defaults, how people will do their analyses, right? So that's tricky. Yeah, so at least that's one thought that I have when it comes to designing our packages.
Thanks. Do you have any reflections, Marc?
Yeah, I've run into similar problems with Metagear where, you know, originally I developed this simple GUI to screen abstracts and titles. And the idea was, you know, you could zip through many quickly by clicking yes and no. And my original version of it, I included like an in-between where you're like, maybe, I don't know. And what I found was it ends up just causing so many conflicts because if you're not trained in knowing what you're looking for, you're just going to end up clicking maybe all the time. And if you're doing a dual screening design, it just means that there's a very low concordance between the decisions made because someone is just saying, I don't know, over and over and over again, you know, passing the buck on making decisions. And my goal there was just to make things flexible for someone to decide on what help them make decisions. But having that built in as like a default, it just causes challenges later on when you're trying to think about what decisions you made, because now you got to redo all the ones that you coded as maybes. And so these are, I have many regrets, but that is like one of the silly ones that I've come up to where by design, I should have just put more thought into it rather than just flat out giving everyone the ability to make decisions in a flexible way. Maybe being more rigid on the front end would have facilitated research much more quickly. These are things you learn when you're just like building these tools from scratch. You can't anticipate all the scenarios in which people are going to apply these tools. I mean, yeah.
Great point. Thank you very much. We have a really great question from Luke. Luke, do you want to ask it?
Yeah, can do. Had to find the unmute button. So it's essentially just a question, particularly in context of the pandemic that's going on at the moment, where research students, in particularly undergraduate and master students, were encouraged to do a literature review or a systematic review rather than, you know, field research or any other lab-based work. And is there a possibility that we're poisoning the well in forcing, or not forcing, but encouraging students to do a systematic review in 3 months, when in reality they often take much longer? And then because of that, the methods they're exposed to are often not accurate review methods.
Well, I have some thoughts about that. So I don't know how many times I've seen people do a systematic review / meta-analysis because, well, some supervisor said, well, you know, you're reading all these papers anyway, so you might as well just do a meta-analysis on them. And so that's going to be like the first year project for this PhD student. And this, in I would say 9 out of 10 cases, that ends up in a pretty big disaster. And so then the bottom line is, I will never, ever do a meta-analysis ever again. I don't know. I see a lot of people here nodding their heads. So that experience probably resonates with a lot of people. So yeah, I think that's something to be aware of. So we do not end up poisoning the well, as you put it, or discouraging people from actually doing this type of work because it's so important.
Thanks so much, Wolfgang. So we're quite close on time there. We've got 5 minutes left, unless Harriet or Marc, you had some really pressing comments on that. Then I'll just take the opportunity to say thank you so much for joining this final panel discussion, Marc, Wolfgang, and Harriet. If the attendants who are on Slack have any questions on Slack or by Twitter or on YouTube, then feel free to send them in. We'll try and get all of the questions and answers from across the conference, although we have a lot now, up on a Q&A or an FAQ on the Hackathon website shortly. So we have come to the end of ESMARConf 2021. I can't quite believe it. It's been an amazing conference, and I just wanted to share some numbers, because we all work with R, we like numbers. We have, and many of you have heard me harp on about this already, but I'm just really shocked. 513 people registered for this conference. We have had a huge amount of engagement on Twitter, and we'll try and pull that together next week. But we've had over 3,200 views on YouTube. Right now, there are 37 people watching, but in this session on and off, there have been 48 views. The welcome session has been viewed 444 times. Many of the other sessions, the live stream sessions, are rapidly getting up to that number. So there's been a huge amount of engagement. We really hope you've enjoyed this format, that it's worked for you, that it's been okay for your time zones. Thanks for bearing with us for that. And I wanted to invite my other co-organizers just to say something. Luke has got his hand up.
Yeah. So just on behalf of the co-organizing committee, we all really wanted to say a massive thank you to Neil, who for a good chunk of the organization has kind of been single-handedly dragging us kicking and screaming towards this, and has been master ceremonies absolutely fantastically over the last 2 days. So just a massive thank you to him. It's great to see so many people involved in things like this, and hopefully the collaborations and any kind of new friendships you've made along the way will continue in the coming year. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Luke. I should say that Matt was down to facilitate the last session, and I just muscled in because I'm so used to hearing my own voice. So I'm very sorry, Matt. I want to just extend my thanks to the organising committee. Organising team. They've been an incredibly vital support, from screening abstracts, from helping to come up with plans and times and everything. So yeah, group effort. And I wanted to say as well that this conference for me has epitomized everything that Martin and I wanted when we set out starting the Evidence Synthesis Hackathon, which is really a positive, inclusive, open community for networking, for collaboration, for learning, for sharing. Yeah, I think it really has been. It's also, I've been dragged kicking and screaming into 2021 from a technology perspective, trying to run this conference. So apologies for the hiccups. Thank you for bearing with the, I would say, minor technical glitches every now and then, nothing major. Yeah, thank you again. And everybody, welcome to the Evidence Synthesis family. So I just wanted to share this screen while I invite anyone else from the organising committee, Matt, Kira, or Emily, if you have anything you'd like to add. But here is the links to, at the top, the evidence, the ESMARConf website on the Evidence Synthesis Hackathon. You can continue to get all of these resources, all of these recorded presentations in live stream as sessions or individual talks on the YouTube channel with the second link. And please, please, please vote for your favorite talk. I'm going to immediately go away and do that. We'll announce the winner later on next week. Yeah, I'd just like to hand over if anybody else has anything to say. No? Head shaking. Thumbs up from Marc. Thank you so much. And I officially close the ESMARConf 2021 conference.